Sometimes, when I look at you, I can't help but feel like I've seen this story before, and yet, every time it plays out, I can't help but wonder if there's a new twist I'm not ready for. I never imagined you'd fall into such a familiar pattern, yet here we are, and it almost feels like I've been here before in a different life, wondering how this chapter will end. It's strange how predictable the mind can be, especially when we think we know someone so well, and then, unexpectedly, their actions unfold with an all too familiar rhythm. You were always a mystery, but now that I see the way you respond, it feels like reading the same book over and over, only to realize the plot hasn't changed. I never thought I'd see the day when I could predict your next move, and yet, here we are, with your every thought and feeling being laid out before me like a map of your soul. There's a certain comfort in knowing what's coming, but it also leaves me wondering if we've reached the point where nothing truly surprises me anymore. I didn't realize how much of your life I had already figured out, but now that I've seen the patterns, it's like the puzzle is slowly coming together, piece by piece. It's curious how we can think we know someone, and then their habits and decisions seem to fall into place in a way that feels both comforting and predictable at the same time. Sometimes I wonder if the predictability of our relationship means we've reached a place of understanding, or if we're simply caught in the endless loop of repetition. I never thought I'd say this, but the more I see of you, the more I realize that the comfort of predictability isn't always as soothing as it seems. You've always been unpredictable in the most endearing ways, but now it's as if you've become a character I can read without opening the pages. There's something almost haunting about how your thoughts and actions have become so familiar to me, as if your soul has been written in a language I can now easily translate. I thought there was still so much to learn about you, but as time goes on, I find that the more I know, the more everything feels so predictable. Maybe we're all just creatures of habit, moving through life in rhythms that are easy to follow, and maybe that's what makes us who we are. When the unexpected becomes the expected, it's like you can almost hear the universe laughing at your inability to see the future you've already lived. It's amazing how time can teach us the unspoken patterns in each other's lives, making every moment feel both intimate and eerily predictable. I never thought I'd see you in such a light, where everything you say and do feels like a rerun of a story I've already lived. Isn't it strange how someone can surprise you by being exactly who you thought they were all along? It's as if the predictability of it all has become the only constant. There's something almost poetic about realizing that the person you once thought was full of mystery has now become the most predictable part of your life. Sometimes I catch myself wondering whether it's your nature or my expectations that have created the predictability between us. It's almost comforting how predictable you've become, but I wonder if that comfort is a sign of familiarity or a sign of something we've both failed to see. Is it a good thing or a bad thing when everything someone does feels like an open book and you can't help but read it before it even unfolds? I never thought I'd reach the point where I could predict every move you make, but now I can't help but wonder if it's because you're showing me who you really are. You've become so predictable, but I can't decide if it's because I've learned too much or if I'm just seeing through your wall in a way I never did before. Sometimes the most unpredictable people end up being the most predictable once you understand the depths of their heart. I thought I could never guess what you were going to do next, and yet now I find myself waiting for you to follow the same old path. Every time I think I've figured you out, there's a moment where I wonder if we're just repeating the same story over and over, never quite reaching the end. Your predictability isn't a flaw, it's just the way your mind works, and I'm starting to understand the rhythm of it all. There's a strange kind of magic in predictability, the way the world becomes so much clearer when you start seeing the same patterns over and over. I never thought I'd find your patterns so easy to read, but now that I do, it's as if the story is already written before you even speak. It's like the script of your life has been unfolding right in front of me, and now, as the words are written, they feel all too familiar. When everything you do feels like a repeat of the last, it makes you question if we're trapped in a loop or if this is just the comfort of the life we've created together. I didn't expect the twists and turns to become so predictable, yet here I am, waiting for the next chapter to unfold exactly as I knew it would. There's a kind of peace in knowing what comes next, but also a hint of sadness that the mystery I once cherished has faded into something predictable. It's funny how you can spend so much time wondering what someone will do next, only to realize that you've already figured it out without even trying. Maybe the most surprising thing about you is how predictable you've become, and maybe that's the greatest revelation of all. I've always believed that every moment is an opportunity for the unexpected, yet here I am, learning that sometimes the most surprising thing is the lack of surprise. The more I know you, the more your patterns reveal themselves, and now I can't help but wonder if I'm growing closer to you or simply falling into a routine. In the beginning, it was all unknowns. But now I find myself waiting for your next move, like I've already seen the story unfold 1,000 times. Your predictability used to be something I admired, but now I'm starting to wonder if I'm missing out on the mysteries that once made you so intriguing. How strange it is that someone can be both entirely predictable and still hold a space of wonder within you. Maybe it's not that you've changed, but rather I've started to see the patterns that were always there in front of me. Sometimes the things we think we know best are the things that surprise us the most. But in your case, it seems like you've become an open book I can't stop reading. I thought you were full of secrets, but now it's as though the mystery has faded and I'm left with nothing but the knowledge of what comes next. There's something bittersweet about realizing that the person you've spent so long trying to understand is finally revealing themselves in a way that's both familiar and predictable. It's almost as though time has made you a reflection of your past. With every choice, you make a step further into the predictable routine we've built. I find myself caught between the comfort of knowing what will happen next and the sadness of realizing that the unpredictability I once loved has been replaced by patterns I can now predict. The more I see, the more I understand, and yet, the more I realize how much I miss the uncertainty that once surrounded you. Sometimes, when everything feels so predictable, I wonder if we've grown too comfortable, too familiar, and if we're missing out on the excitement we once had. It's funny how time can turn the most unpredictable souls into creatures of habit, and yet I can't help but feel comfort in the fact that I can now predict you. I never thought I'd say this, but you've become a map I can read with my eyes closed, and I can't help but wonder if that's a good thing or a bad thing. What's more surprising than predictability itself is realizing that the patterns we once fought against are now the very things that keep us grounded. I didn't expect you to be predictable, but now that I see it, I realize there's a beauty in knowing what's coming next, even if it's not always the most exciting. You've gone from an enigma to a story I can anticipate, and while part of me misses the unknown, part of me feels relieved by the familiarity of it all. It's almost like you've become a mirror of the past, and with each action, I find myself seeing the same reflections over and over again. I once thought I'd never be able to predict you, but now I see that in the end, we're all just creatures of habit, following paths we've walked before. There's a strange comfort in predictability, a sense of safety in knowing that no matter what, you'll always react in the same way. It's odd how something so familiar can suddenly feel new again, simply because I've started noticing the patterns I never saw before. I didn't realize you were so predictable, but now that I see it, I can't decide whether I feel comforted or trapped by the certainty of what's to come. I thought you'd always keep me guessing, but now I'm left with the knowledge that your every move is mapped out in front of me like a story I've already read.